Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. My name is Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week we continue our foray into the origins of id Software. This is id Software Part 4. We're reading from a book called Masters of Doom by David Kushner. I forget his first name. I wanted to say Tony Kushner. I wanted to say...
it's not Jared Kushner.
Jared Kushner, yeah, all these other Kushners. David Kushner wrote.
I think David Kushner's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's a great book. Pick it up on Amazon. It's from like 2003, I think. So it covers up to about like probably the Doom 3 era of id, which is perfect because we're into history and not contemporary happenings at id Software. But we're on chapter 7 now, and Mike is going to take us through this.
Yeah, I got chapter 7. Tyler's got chapter 8. If you're a big Tyler fan, like skip ahead 20 minutes. You know, that's what I would say.
No, but then you'll be lost. You have to do it in order. So don't skip.
Yeah,
Listen
that's
to
how
Mike.
we get you. That's how we get you. Okay, So id Software, where we last left off, they're in Mesquite, Texas. Yeah, right outside of Dallas.
Where they make great barbecue sauce.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm sure they do. Also, hilarious note about Mesquite, Texas, they attempted to ban video games in 1982. Their case went to the Supreme Court, and they lost. Boom! So now id's there, which is fun. We're looking
video
at
games that want to be banned.
That's right. We're also I believe this is 1991 still, the very end of 1991 is where we're at, and then moving in there, or 1982, I think. It's the beginning of 92 is where we're at.
Okay.
If you want to know about year-wise. So,
because we're right off the release of Wolfenstein, right?
Yeah, right. So La Prada Apartments is where they settled in, and they were these versus Wisconsin. I mean, you got some big loft apartments, and you got swimming pools. You know, it's a lot warmer, which was a big deal for the id guys because they were in Wisconsin, which is quite cold in the wintertime. And also, they were super close to Scott Miller of Apogee. And when they first moved there, Scott actually took them out to a Tex-Mex dinner, and then they went to a big arcade that had a go-kart track, and it's a pretty big deal for them because now they share 50% of their royalties with Apogee, which was an unheard of amount at the time.
Like for id, is that a lot for id or a lot for Apogee?
A lot for id.
Okay.
For the publisher to be splitting it 50-50 with you is pretty bananas.
Usually the publisher takes a bigger cut.
Yeah, usually. So Miller also decided to take pressure off of the guys, and he decided to use his developers at Apogee, because Apogee was making games, which we're going to get to in chapter 2, in the next chapter of this, I believe. But they actually took over the soft disk orders. So they started fulfilling games for soft disk. Soft disk, thinking they were getting id games, actually getting Apogee games. And the first game they sent there was called Scuba Venture, which sounds pretty neat. But the original plan with Wolfenstein was for the guys to do 3 episodes with 10 levels each. But then Scott learned, you know what? You guys can churn out a level a day? Really? That's your productivity? So instead, he had the guys make 6 episodes. So a total of 60 levels for Wolfenstein 3D. And the deal would be the first trilogy you could get for $35, or if you wanted both trilogies, you could get them for $50. So there was also a big personnel change at the time for them. They fired Mark Rain, who, if you recall, was acting as the president of id Software. And they fired Mark Rain because it just wasn't working out. He was the one getting them deals with FormGen, who they're still working with. So they don't. The book kind of doesn't explain why they fired Mark Rain, other than it just wasn't working out. But the real reason they fired Mark Rain, one of the big reasons, is they wanted to get their friend Jay back. Do you guys remember Jay Wilbur?
Oh,
Hero?
Good old Jay Wilbur.
Yeah. So Romero and Carmack called him, and they were like, hey, man, if you join id, you can have 5% of the company and free reign of the business side of things. And Jay was super sick of working at Softdisk and was like, you know what? I'm going to take you up on the offer. Plus, Shreveport to Mesquite, not too long a drive, which is also important.
He didn't have to go all the way to Wisconsin and down like everybody else did.
Yeah. Poor Kevin. Okay. Also, important thing to note at this time, too, hiring Jay was kind of a big deal because they wanted to keep it in their friend group, and they were getting, it's kind of weird to say headhunted, but CEOs were asking if they needed a CEO. People wanted to be executive officers at id.
Interesting.
Big corporate suit types is how I would describe it. You know, they saw this was going to be something. And instead they went with Jay, which I think is a good idea because looking back on it, it's easy to say, but you want your friends involved, people that actually care. So within days, the studio was up and running at their new home in Mesquite, Texas, and they were playing Street Fighter 2 now as their new hobby between programming. That's where we're at as far as like games they were playing. Before it was Mario 3, now it's Street Fighter 2. Okay?
Street Fighter 2 is the new hotness.
Yeah, the new hotness. Now, Carmack had a problem going on, and it was not computer related because he solves those. We all know this. Okay. But what happened was Tom on the team wanted him to make push walls, essentially walls where if the player bumped up against them, they opened up and there would be a secret hiding spot inside of them. It was kind of just a way to put secrets in the game. Carmack thought that was really clunky, and he made this super smooth engine where doors would just automatically open and close for you, and it would be really cool. And he just kind of pushed back. Here's actually a quote from the book that kind of explains Carmack's reasoning, and I think it's really good. So here it is. Making a game, writing code for Carmack was increasingly becoming an exercise in elegance, how to write something that achieved the desired effect in the cleanest way possible. And that pretty much explains Carmack, because he's like, I already made this thing super great, and push walls would make it look super bad. So that's how I feel, and I'm going to stick to my guns. And he really fought both Tom and Romero on this. Like, they were kind of conflicting. It was like kind of a 2v1 scenario, and Carmack certainly stuck to his guns. So Romero pleaded to let Tom and him have secret walls in the game, and Carmack was just like, no, we're not doing it. And not to mention the fact that during this time too, John Romero and Tom Hall were increasingly getting on everyone's nerves. We already described Tom as being really weird, like making alien noises. And being bizarre, and Romero loved that, and they were having super fun times together doing that in the privacy of their office. Well, now in Mesquite, they had a sound guy, the guy Bobby Prince, who was doing the sound for Wolfenstein. He was in the office, and he had microphones. So now just take those weird sounds and start amplifying them with microphones and recording software, and it started to really annoy everyone in the office. So between the 16-hour days, like 7 days a week, they're constantly working. Tom and Romero being annoying, and then the mounting pressures from deadlines and everything, and also that new schedule they imposed of being like, we got to do 60 levels for this game. A level a
day.
The next obstacle was something they were not going to put up with, and that was FormGen, the company that produced the retail versions of Commander Keen. They were still on that kick of Wolfenstein was too gory, and they, quote, didn't want people bringing up World War II stuff, which I think is just such a funny argument, looking back on this now. Scott called the id guys. So they couldn't get a hold of the id guys for this, the FormGen people, so they actually called Scott Miller and told him about it. And then Scott called the id guys and was like, you know what? Just ramp it up. Who cares? Just keep going. Just do whatever you want to do, which is kind of cool because he was the cool boss in this scenario. Don't listen to FormGen. They can figure out their stuff. And so Adrian proceeded to add more blood, more gore, and more skeletons. And then Romero and Tom then recorded a bunch of German phrases for Nazi deaths, which are pretty great. They also included a death cam that would show a replay of a death of a big boss at the end of each episode. And there was even a screen at the very beginning of the game that said, quote, this game is voluntarily rated PC-12 for profound carnage. And this is fun because this is actually the first voluntary rating in a video game.
It sounds less like a rating of a video game and more of an advertisement of how gory the game is. They were proud to put that on there,
Oh yeah, these guys loved it. I mean, they all were about speed and brutality. That was the entire mindset of Wolfenstein, and I think it's pretty clear when you play it nowadays. I had an iOS port of Wolfenstein 3D, and I loved it. It's gone now. Once again, many things on the App Store, where I'm I bought this and now I can't find it. It just disappeared.
Yeah.
There was one matter left though before they could launch this game, and that was the push wall argument that I mentioned before. That's right. They're still fighting over if they can or cannot have push walls. And Romero and Tom, it was getting kind of close to the deadline here, and they're nearing the end of the game, and they finally were like, Carmack, come on, let us have push walls. And he's like, oh, I already put them in. You guys were right. People do like secrets. I just put it in. So what was built up as being a big fight, Carmack just threw in the game last minute because he's like, it'll make gameplay better. And it was kind of a good point in them, for the team, because they realized they could reason with Carmack, if they brought up a good point, because he really was and we're going to see this later on down the line. He is id at this point for them. Like his technology is what's pushing these games. Romero and Tom then added a bunch of secrets to Wolfenstein 3D, like rooms full of treasure and stuff, but also they added a secret level that's just Pac-Man with ghosts, which I think is really cool. I never even got to, I kind of want to look that up and check it
me
out.
too. I've never seen that level before.
The book talks about how the game also was like made fun of the player. Like they kind of teased the player, which I thought was pretty cool. So the difficulty rating, as we all know, it wasn't just easy, normal, or hard. If you played Wolfenstein, it goes from "Can I play, Daddy?" to "I am death incarnate." That's like. Also, the game would make fun of you if you tried to quit. It would be like press N for more carnage, or press Y to be a weenie. Which
Doom did the same thing. I remember.
You don't hear people call each other weenies anymore. That's a
really 90s insult.
That's a real 90s insult. Okay, so the shareware episode, after all this was done, Wolfenstein 3D was uploaded on May 5th, 1992 at 4 o'clock a.m. And when they uploaded the game, they uploaded to Software Creations BBS. That's kind of their home base of where they would initially upload the game for shareware, and then it would just go all over the internet. And they hoped the game would do well. They're like, well, would it surpass Commander Keen? We hope so, but we don't know for sure. And then they kind of went to bed at 4 a.m. like, we'll see what happens. That first month of Wolfenstein 3D's release, the royalty check they got from Apogee was $100,000.
Holy moly.
Yeah. So
which means the game made $200,000, right? Apogee took
in
half
the first month. And so the game was an underground sensation among BBS communities in May, and then like by summer it was a mainstream sensation.
Wow.
They even like kind of people called it virtual reality. Like it was like, you know, when there's a new technology and the local news gets a hold of it and they're like, look at this amazing thing. That's kind of what realistic. Yeah, exactly. That's what they did.
Murder simulator.
Well, yeah, Wolfenstein 3, they're like, this is practically virtual reality. There were a lot of news stories about how people were getting motion sick because it was moving too fast. If only they knew what video games were like now. The violence in the game was a big critique, too. My favorite phrase in the book that they said a reviewer said, quote, "This game certainly goes heavy on the ketchup," which I think is a funny way to say a game's bloody, I think. The last piece of controversy about Wolfenstein, though, was the inclusion of Nazi symbols. So Germany had a rule in place, a pretty hard, fast rule that you cannot have Nazi symbols in pop culture because you're monetizing that. That's a piece of history they want gone.
Yeah, that rule was only reversed like relatively recently in the past few years, I think.
Yeah, and so Germany banned the game outright. And once that happened, CompuServe, which I didn't look up a lot about CompuServe. Do you know a lot about them, Tyler? Like what they did?
In the early 90s, they were one of the larger internet providers, maybe not the right term for these companies in the early 90s before they all connected and opened up. But CompuServe was like a sort of BBS internet provider that people would have paid their subscription to CompuServe and then had access to lots of different internet things. Like other companies that did the same thing would be like America Online, and there's lots of other ones. Eventually, they would all open their things up to communicate with each other, but CompuServe was a big one at the time.
Yeah, so that's Tyler just explained it great, but they actually, after seeing that Germany banned Wolfenstein 3D, they pulled it from their entire service. And this actually was important at the time because essentially Wolfenstein 3D found itself in a debate about the legality of cyberspace. And luckily there was one hero lawyer who's unnamed in the book that said cyberspace should be treated as an independent nation, which I think is like net neutrality and all that stuff coming up recently in the news, I think is a pretty good thing. But also thank goodness we don't have to do AOL anymore. And be like that. Oh my gosh.
I was wrong. CompuServe opened up their doors to the internet in 1989, so never mind. But they were a big internet service provider then, and they ran a lot of BBSs and servers and stuff that you would have downloaded Wolfenstein from. Yeah.
So there was also some dissent on the team. There was kind of a split at this point they talk about in the book about having a modded version of the game out there. Kevin and Scott did not like it. Kevin being Kevin in id and Scott Miller from Apogee. But Carmack and Romero were all for it because, as we talked about before, like Carmack was like, nothing should be copyrighted, everything should be available because that's how you progress as technology. So actually, this is why we have the famous version of Wolfenstein where you kill Barney the Purple Dinosaur instead of Mecha Hitler. Is it Mecha Hitler or Mega Hitler?
I think it's Mecha Hitler.
Okay. The guys didn't stop developing, though, once the shareware game came out because, again, they had to do 5 more episodes. So they cranked all of that out, in like a month. And then they ended up taking a break in the middle of the month to attend an Apple II event in Kansas City, like an Apple Fest, which, as you recall, is how Romero and Carmack met Jay and got to know everyone, and how they essentially got into the business.
Yeah.
But it just so happened at this Apple II event, guess who was there? The original creator of Castle Wolfenstein, Silas Werner.
Nice.
And he was very complimentary of the game, and he got to play it, and he signed everything for them. And he actually even said, in the book, it mentions how he was like, oh, yes, my friend told me about your game, and he played it, and it was really cool. I just thought it was a really neat moment to include in the book. So that
cool.
was going on. It's like a little break while they were developing, and a month after that Apple II event is when they finally finished all of the episodes. So they decided as a team, because they do everything as a team, they're going to go on a vacation. So they each got $5,000 to spend on a week-long trip to Disney World.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so fun.
It is at the Grand Floridian Hotel. They got their first fans. So the story goes that Romero and them were sitting in the hot tub at the hotel, and they were talking about Wolfenstein, and these guys came up and did you guys make Wolfenstein? And they started talking to them about it, and they just really enjoyed it. And it was their first big fan moment.
Oh, that's so cool. They were becoming celebrities.
Yeah, exactly. This is also a big point for them, too, because they finally gave themselves raises. If you recall, earlier on in the book, they were paying themselves $750 a week, and now they decided to up that to $45,000 a year salaries for everyone on the team, which is pretty big, I think. Mm-hmm. So especially for the early 90s, it's pretty good. I don't have the inflation calculator in front of me if you want to do that, Tyler, but it's pretty intense. So
I'll do that. I'll be right back.
Be right back. Tyler's got to go into his room that has the inflation calculator inside of it. It's a giant computer with levers and knobs and buttons. So this is where John Romero and John Carmack's differences in personality become more public, too. This is kind of where the first rumblings of it happened, obviously before this history book came out. And that becomes Tom, actually. So Tom, in Wolfenstein 3D hint manual that he wrote, he refers to John Romero as the surgeon and John Carmack as the engine. Whereas John Romero is the ultimate gamer, Carmack, Tom described as the genius who is ready, already sick of his tech that he just made, and he wants to keep progressing and progressing and progressing. He never will stop working. He just wants to get better and better at making things, specifically game engines. And Carmack actually did get his wish, because when id developed the retail spin-off of Wolfenstein for FormGen, which was called Spear of Destiny, 4Gen, by the way, no longer cared about the gore because they saw how popular Wolfenstein was, and money talks, and everyone can trade their principles for money, as you can tell. Carmack decided he didn't need to work on Spear of Destiny anymore because that engine was already in place. So he started to work on a new project with some devs they met in Wisconsin, and those devs had a studio called Raven, and that was two brothers, Brian and Stephen Raffel, and Carmack made a new engine for them, and that game was called Shadowcaster. And so while this was going on, Adrian was getting tired of drawing Nazi imagery for Spear of Destiny, and Tom wanted to work more on Keen. So distractions were mounting while they were making Spear of Destiny. People were kind of going out. It said that in the book, when Tom got bored, he just wanted to play games. So Tom and Romero ended up just playing games all the time, and not producing anything really. The distractions got so bad at the office that Carmack took his sweet Next computer and worked in his apartment, and they didn't see him for 3 weeks while he worked on Shadowcaster. Did you get that inflation numbers, Tyler?
I did. $83,104.38. That's in today's dollars what the value of 1992's $45,000 would be.
That's really good.
Yeah, so that is a living salary for sure.
For sure. Okay. Spear of Destiny came out, by the way, on September 18th, 1992, and no surprise, it was a huge success. It was now getting offers from everyone. They were getting offers for speaking opportunities to be how did you do this? They were getting awards. They were getting accolades. They were now pulling $150,000 a month from shareware. combined with Keen and with Wolfenstein, which is pretty nuts to think about because it was very easy to pirate this software at the time, but people were still paying for it. Like, they just gave you a floppy disk. There's nothing that said you can't copy everything on that floppy disk to another floppy disk, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
see, people will pay for games. That's why, that's a tangent, but I get upset when companies put big old copy protection things on their games. Like, people want to pay for games.
Yeah, people want to pay for them. They want to respect the people that made them, as long as you don't burn those people out. That's the new thing.
Right.
Okay, you don't want to burn out your employees. Okay, so political tangents aside, id was contacted at this point even by, guess who? Nintendo. That's right.
Oh, yeah.
People that passed on the original Mario 3 PC port. They were like, now they want id to make a port of Wolfenstein 3D for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. And they agreed to the terms. Even if this meant replacing the dogs with rats. That was a big complaint, apparently. People really didn't like that you killed dogs in Wolfenstein. And then the customer helplines at Apogee were always like, but you kill people too. And they're like, that's fine. Dogs.
That's fine. But the dogs, no.
And they also agreed to tone the blood down on the Nintendo port of Wolfenstein 3D. Jay also licensed the Wolfenstein engine to a religious game company called Wisdom Tree that we have actually talked about in previous episodes. They made unlicensed games for Nintendo and other systems. And they would use this engine to make a Noah's Ark game where they describe you like throwing apples and fruit at animals. I don't know. I don't know how the game works, but I thought it was kind of a fun little nod in the book to another thing we read in the other book. So while this was all happening, Carmack once again did an amazing thing. He added diminished lighting, so like things would recede into and out of shadows, and then he texture mapped floors and ceilings. And so the ceilings and floors would also have different heights. Because he added these things to his new engine for Shadowcaster, the game ran at about half speed compared to Wolfenstein. But since Shadowcaster was more about exploration, this was totally okay. He also added sloped hills. You know, who doesn't love a good sloped hill? Okay, what would games be now without sloped hills? Let's be real. Okay. So now they decided they needed to use this technology from Shadowcaster for their next game. But what are they going to do? Okay. Tom immediately pitched Commander Keen, and Carmack was actually like really excited for a second about doing Commander Keen in 3D. But to Tom's disappointment, that quickly faded away because all of them were kind of over keen. You know, like Adrian hated doing the cutesy art style. They were like, we're on to this whole new world of like doing faster, you know, games, brutal, quick. That's what they're going for. And Keen just wasn't it. They also thought like about doing something with aliens, but then they realized that would just kind of come off as like not only a little bit hack, but also there's a movie called Aliens, and they were afraid of copyright infringement. So Carmack, that's right, Carmack had the idea for this game. He wanted demons. He had a bunch of experience with demons in his life in the book. It said he went to the Catholic Church. You know, there's a lot of demons there, but also he played D&D, which has even more demons, and he even made an item called the Demonicron that we talked about in his D&D campaign. And Carmack liked this idea of using demons and like versus new technology. Adrian got excited because he could draw demons, and they kind of pitched to them like that as a whole. They brainstormed a cross between Evil Dead 2 and Aliens. And as we all know the title of their game, some might not know where it's from. So the title of the game came from the 1986 Martin Scorsese film called The Color of Money. There's a pool hustler played by Tom Cruise, and a mark goes, "What you got in there?" looking at his like pool case. And then Tom Cruise replies, "In here, Doom." Boom.
Ooh, I like that.
Not Doom Boom, but Doom. You know,
Just
I got
Doom.
excited.
Yeah.
When I get excited, I say Boom. But now this is all you, Tyler. You get to tell us about Doom.
We're on to chapter 8 now in our book. So the team is now deep in the throes of creating yet another game. And they were pretty inspired by like a fresh new direction. They would get to continue innovating on the tech they'd built for Wolfenstein while exploring an even darker and grittier tone. So everybody was getting what they wanted. Well, everyone except for Tom. We'll come back to that. I think in the early days, it did a pretty good job of making sure everybody working there kind of got what they wanted. Carmack always wanted new technology to develop and build. Romero always had new gameplay ideas, both inspired by and driving those technology decisions. And Adrian finally got to work on the goriest thing that id had done yet. So it makes sense that Doom would turn out to be their biggest success up to this point as well. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here.
I think people know that, though. You know?
Spoilers, Doom did all right. So they worked in a building called the Town East Tower, which was a dark cube-shaped building that was different from everything else in Mesquite. It had a lot of regular types of folks in there, like lawyers and doctors and dentists and whatever other things are done in offices. But the building itself was just so weird for Mesquite. In fact, the dentist that worked next door to them constantly had people howling out in pain, mostly because it's a dentist office, and I think that's a pretty regular occurrence in dentist offices. But the guys were cool with it, though, because it sort of fit that vibe that they were going for with the demons and the blood and the gore. They were building for Doom, so it worked out, having just people screaming and yelling in the office next door all the time.
Nice, you know?
Yeah.
That really fits.
Yep. And even though Doom would be one of the many peaks in id's career, they were still on top of the world at right now. Commander Keen was still crushing it, and both Wolfenstein 3D and Spear of Destiny were topping the charts too. So they were basically just rolling in money. It's like Scrooge McDuck just diving into money and swimming around in the coins.
That's right. So much coin swimming. It hurts.
It hurts. You can't really do that in the real world, but you can in DuckTales. So honestly, they probably could have given themselves bigger raises. I bet, like the raises that Mike was talking about before, the $45,000. They probably could have done even more than that. But also at this time, the book notes that Apogee's own game, which was not developed by id, was also rounding out the top of the charts. That game was Duke Nukem. So it was a good time to be id Software and Apogee right now. They had like tons of top games between Commander Keen and Wolfenstein, Spear of Destiny, Duke Nukem, all at the top of the charts. But id wasn't so happy because Sean Green, who was an employee of Apogee, let our heroes know that Apogee wasn't really holding up their end of the deal. People weren't able to get through to purchase games, including id's games. Sean told the guys that this was mostly because Apogee was fooling around most of the time and not actually doing any work. They were just messing around, all the while collecting 50% of the revenue that id's games were generating. So the guys didn't really take too well to this. They'd published their own games before, and they were confident they could do it again. And they knew they had a hit on their hands with Doom, so they weren't keen to share that money with a publisher who wasn't actually doing any work to earn their half. So Carmack wanted to ditch. He didn't want to ditch, sorry. He just wanted to make games, and he didn't care about anything else. He was like, let Apogee handle everything that's not making the game, and just let me sit in my room and make games. He was not interested in running a big company, which he thought would take away from that. So he was more than happy to just let them do whatever they wanted to so that he could have pizza and Diet Coke to fuel his work. That's apparently Carmack just runs on pizza and Diet Coke. Yeah.
Man, me and John Carmack have a lot in common dietary-wise, at least at this point.
I would love to just eat pizza and drink Diet Coke all day.
I'm all about that action.
Yeah. So they eventually decided to leave Apogee, but they promised John Carmack that he wouldn't have to do anything he didn't want to do. He could just lock himself in a room and just program. They would take care of the rest. So they assuaged his fears of having to do more businessy stuff when he just wanted to program.
Solid use of assuaged.
Thanks.
You don't hear that word that often. That's really great.
No. Scott and Apogee were surprisingly cool with the separation. And by this point, they had a ton of games that they were publishing, and while id was one of their biggest developers they were working with, they were going to be fine with all the other games they had coming down the pipeline. Apogee was on the map. They'd be fine. Also, in a weird twist of events...
This hurt my feelings so much.
Yeah. Carmack got rid of his cat. So they had this cat who went with them to all their places. Like, everybody loved this cat. He was Carmack's cat. They even had the cat listed as his significant other in like emergency documents for work or something, or in the directory or something at id. The cat was listed as his significant other. But he got rid of the cat. He said, and this is a direct quote from the book, Mitzi was having a net negative impact on my life. I took her to the animal shelter. And then he did his trademark. I don't know if we've talked about the hum that he does when he says some things, but he does like a hum.
I want to find him humming.
Me too. So
there's got to be YouTube like stuff of him humming somewhere. Probably. I'm still upset with him. I'm really mad he got rid of Mitzi. You know?
Yeah. So Carmack just didn't have time for BS in his life that took away from him being able to make technology. That cat had been around forever, but as soon as she was a burden, he cut her out. She had been like kind of peeing everywhere and like basically getting old and being not useful as a cat.
Being a cat?
Yeah, basically being an old cat. But as soon as she was a burden, he cut her out. No problem. Which is ice cold, if you ask me. That's just really, really mean. And Romero's like, dude, they will probably put her down. And he just didn't care.
That's so upsetting.
Yeah.
I think we should spend more time focusing on how Mitzi the cat is the real hero of id Software.
Yeah. Rest in peace. In the arms of the... Okay. So
that was really good. Wait, did we just have Sarah McLachlan in here? Did she just come in here? Where'd she come from?
Yeah, we have a special guest, Sarah McLachlan, to talk about animals in the animal shelter. Specifically Mitzi, John Carmack's cat. Rest in peace. Never forget. Okay. Let's have like a few seconds of silence for Mitzi the cat. Okay.
I feel better. That was good.
Yeah. So remember earlier when I mentioned that everyone was getting what they wanted, and then I said, well, Tom did get what he wanted? Well, we're going to cover that now. So Tom wanted to design another game like Commander Keen, something cute and fun that would appeal to a really wide audience. Doom was obviously the opposite of that, and Tom felt increasingly alienated. Romero was having all kinds of fun hanging out with Adrian and Kevin, but Tom felt super left out. Still, he had hoped that Doom would be successful, but Tom wanted something deeper than what they'd done with Wolfenstein. He wanted a game that had a decent story, something that would really engage people's brains, not just their base desires to run and gun and kill stuff. He is the one that proposed the idea that maybe the demons from hell were a result of experiments way out in outer space. And Carmack responded with this iconic quote, "Story in a game is like story in a porn movie. It's expected to be there, but it's not that important." This did not sit well with Tom. Carmack also, at this point in time, was talking about how he wanted this one giant seamless world with no loading screens and no distinct levels in it, and Romero agreed with that. Tom thought that was a dumb idea, and he really thought that people enjoyed going from start to finish of a level and like having that break where they complete the level and then move on to the next one.
I think I agree with Tom, just so you know. I like levels.
Yeah, I do too. Or
I guess it depends on the type of game, because if you're going to play Grand Theft Auto, if it had levels, it would be a real bummer.
Yeah, it depends on the game. Like I'm thinking probably what Carmack was thinking was something more like Half-Life, where there's no there aren't like distinct levels where you like go from the beginning to the end of the level. They just kind of blend in together. I would assume that that's kind of what he was thinking.
That's the case, then Doom would have a lot more trams.
Yeah. Yep. So Tom didn't think that was a good idea. The Doom engine had a ton of new features over the Wolfenstein engine. Mainly, it had some of those lighting capabilities that Mike was talking about earlier. Because like in Wolfenstein 3D, everything was lit all the time, 100%. In Doom, though, there were areas that were dark, areas that were lighter, and all levels in between. And everything in Wolfenstein 3D was also the same height. So all of the rooms were just, they were the same exact height. There were no stairs, there were no ramps. It was all just like 2D mazes, basically. So while it was technically 3D where you went forward and backwards, the layout of the levels was entirely 2D. So the design of laying those levels was just creating mazes. They wanted something cooler for Doom. They wanted angles and different heights, stairs. The levels were still technically going to be designed in 2D, but at least you could have things on different levels. Also, all of the hallways in Wolfenstein 3D were at like 90-degree angles. There were no it was all just make a full 90 degree.
So square. Look at all these squares.
Very square. Yeah. Both physically and metaphorically.
Yes.
These tech upgrades illustrate why Romero was the perfect fusion of game designer and programmer. So I think truly at his heart, he was a designer, but he was also a very competent programmer and could speak to Carmack in his own language. So Carmack, he could invent anything, but he couldn't always envision how it would be used. For example, the book lays out a time when Carmack was explaining how he'd cracked how to do those different levels of lighting. Romero had this idea of putting strobe lights in the game for atmosphere and creepiness. So he asked Carmack if he could do lighting dynamically, and Carmack he said, yeah, I think we can probably do that. So Romero knew enough to appreciate what Carmack was able to build. I love that so much. It made Romero such a good game designer too, because he knew how the technology worked, and then he knew how to push it to its limits, and he knew what he could ask of Carmack if he wanted something different or newer. He could throw out ideas on how to accomplish that technically, which I just think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, because I imagine we're going to get to a part in the book. Like, I really haven't read ahead in like Wikipedia or anything. And at this point in time, they work so well together. I'm really curious what's going to be the breaking point for the two of them. Because it's got to happen, right? It's going to happen at some point.
How it falls apart.
Yeah, I want to know. Like, because section of the book explained it so well, being like, oh yeah, like it's like reading an encyclopedia in a way that you can understand.
Yeah.
Or what? Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. So Tom, at this point in time, was busy writing up a storyline for Doom, one that included watching your best friend get ripped apart by aliens early on in the game as a way to motivate you to complete it and avenge him. Nobody cared. So, and also at this point in time, remember when Carmack wanted to make Doom a seamless game without levels and Tom thought that wasn't a good idea? Well, 2 months after he declared that's what he wanted, Carmack went back on it. And Tom was like, are you kidding me? Because he'd been working on a design document that assumed that the levels would be seamless. And now that wasn't going to be a thing. And so that was just a crushing blow for Tom, who just wasn't, he was feeling excluded from the shenanigans. He didn't really want to work on Doom anyway. He wanted to work on Commander Keen. And now all the work that he had been doing based on the technical limitations that he thought were going to be a thing for Doom, some of them were going to be different now. And so all the work he had done was feeling like it was for naught. And he was just really, really not feeling it anymore.
I felt bad for Tom.
Me
I
too.
really did. I feel bad for, there's a lot of people in this book that I feel like they get into id at the right time and they work there and it goes great. And then id moves on and they can't move on.
Yeah.
And they get left behind. And I don't know what happens to Tom and I'm worried. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the book switches gears a little bit here and moves into a little bit of other drama. So that Super Nintendo version of Wolfenstein that Nintendo had contracted id to make. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
Great. Id had contracted another person to make it for them. And it was pretty clear that that work was not getting done fast enough. The problem was this person that id had hired to do it. His name was Burger Bill.
What a great nickname. I love this guy.
I looked through the book a little bit. And I couldn't figure out what Burger Bill's last name was. You know what? It doesn't matter. He was called Burger Bill.
I think they actually hid his last name for a reason. I wonder if it's like an agreed upon thing that he would be in this book. And so they just called him Burger Bill and didn't put a last name in there intentionally.
Maybe. The reason he was called Burger Bill was because he was known for keeping burgers in his desk for days, which is gross.
Yeah, Burger Bill's a cool nickname, but the reason he's called Burger Bill's kind of gross, for sure.
Yeah. So the problem was Burger Bill had signed the contract while he was still employed by a company called Interplay, which was also a game publisher. So any work that he was doing at the time was technically owned by Interplay, which includes the Super Nintendo port of Wolfenstein. So Interplay owned the Super Nintendo port of Wolfenstein, which is pretty bad.
Real bad.
They got pretty upset. The guys at id took turns destroying a photo of Bill, which he later found when he came to visit the office. And he was like, what's this? Why are you guys destroying my photo? And they were like, oh, you're fired. And they fired him right there. And then they had Carmack make the port himself.
This is kind of a prime example of what happens when you give a bunch of people in the early 20s a company that makes millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Like just craziness ensues. Like if you fired someone after stabbing a chair with their picture on it now, like the lawsuits would be amazing.
Yeah. And this kind of thing wasn't uncommon at the id offices. The book describes it kind of as like a frat house where the guys would play pranks on each other all the time, while Donna Jackson, their office manager, sort of looked the other way. She was like the id mom that took care of who she called them her boys. And she sort of took care of them and she looked the other way on a lot of stuff. And they destroyed like a lot of stuff, like keyboards and monitors and like, because they just had money to replace the stuff. No problem.
She's also their mom, but also they're her boss. So it's this weird like tug of war where she's, I think like, it's like when you, it's like you have a person just being so nice to you because you pay them to be nice to you. She's not going to discipline or say what they can't do.
Right. She's not going to like put them in timeout. They'll just fire her, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's it. So it was not a great time and certainly something that would not fly in today's world.
I'm going to nominate that Delilah, my cat, and then Luna, your dog, be co-parents of this podcast, though. Is that cool with you?
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
All right, cool. That's good. It's settled. Bang the gavel. Right. We got it done. Board meeting adjourned.
All right. So Doom's realism didn't stop at just being fully 3D. The monsters were also sculpted in clay outside of the game and then scanned in using a tool that, of course, Carmack had developed. They called it the Fuzzy Pumper Palette Shop.
This is amazing.
And these guys were scanning everything. They were scanning themselves. They were scanning their snakeskin boots. They were scanning their bloody scabs, which is gross. but that's why so much of the artwork in Doom kind of looks like it's sort of semi-realistic. Like somebody definitely went in there and sort of touched it up and like drew it, but it's based on like photos or these scans of things, which is cool.
Yeah,
very cool.
I didn't know about that at all.
Yeah, me neither.
That's again, Carmack just making amazing things.
Yeah. Speaking of amazing things Carmack made, he also developed the ability to play over a network, which Romero refined into the deathmatch mode later on. We'll talk more about deathmatch mode in a future episode. But they actually teased in a press release before it had even been built. That's how confident the id was that they'd be able to revolutionize the world with multiplayer gaming between computers, like linking them up, which is pretty cool to me that they were that confident.
I want to jump in here if that's cool. This is actually covered in the last episode of that video game series on Netflix. And while we're a podcast that does history of video games, but we don't care where you get your history, you know? And if you're interested in that more about like the creation of Doom, they have some other, like they cover a lot of this stuff repeated, but it's pretty cool to just watch it, you know, if you want to watch the last.
I've been meaning to watch that.
Yeah, it's the sixth and final episode of the High Score documentary on Netflix. It's really good.
Cool. So at this point, Tom was still not quite getting it. When he was designing his levels, he clung close to his original treatment that he'd done for the game, the one that Carmack and the rest of the guys at id had shut down. So he created all kinds of boring military bases that didn't really fit the vibe of the rest of the game. And so what Romero did was he took the levels that Tom made and reworked them into levels that would eventually become the like weirdness that is Doom, where it's like these military levels that have been sort of ravaged by demons, destroyed by the forces of hell, like strange experiments, weirdness. So understandably, Tom was pretty pissed about after that. He had worked really hard on writing a deep scenario for Doom and on making levels that fit it, levels that worked with Carmack's new technology. But the guys just threw it all away in the service of something that they thought was better. And they may have been right based on how successful Doom would end up being, but Tom kind of felt like garbage at this point. So he was feeling left out. He was feeling shut down on all of his ideas. He didn't even want to work on Doom in the first place. And even the stuff that he did work on for Doom had sort of been shut down as well after Carmack went back on the whole seamless world thing. And so he pulled back. He just sort of withdrew. He like kind of stopped coming to work. He kind of stopped doing stuff because it seemed like everything that he was doing at every turn was just getting shut down. And I can't blame him for feeling pretty bad about that. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I just feel bad
Poor
for Tom. Yeah. So Carmack eventually suggested that they fire Tom. And what's interesting about this is that when the guys at id created id, they knew they needed to have some contingencies in place in case one of the founders needed to go. So they'd seen what happened at Softdisk, and they wanted to make sure that all of the owners were in agreement. So two things needed to happen when they wanted to fire somebody who was a founder or shareholder or whatever. Any firings had to be unanimous. If there was anybody who wanted Tom to stay, then he would stay. The second was that if an owner left, he lost all of his shares so that he wouldn't have any future stake in the company. So if they fired Tom, he'd never see any money from Doom at all. Romero thought that Tom should have another chance, basically because of that. So at this point, Romero took some time to go off on his honeymoon with his new wife in Aruba. That's cool. Everything was great. Wolfenstein was making tons of money. Doom was well on its way. But Tom was still bothering everybody else, and so they still wanted to get him out of the company. And finally, Romero relented. He invited Tom over for a great dinner to break the news. They had tons of fun. They were playing games, eating good food, but he just couldn't break the news to him. So the next day, all of the owners decided to fire Tom.
Oh, man. And the worst part is that's where we leave it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Real downer there at the end of that chapter. Tom's out. He's not going to see any money from Doom. What a bummer. I feel bad for Tom.
This chapter is kind of ruthless. Like it shows you like the ruthless side of like when money gets involved. Like it. That's a whole nother conversation. But it's definitely like ruthlessness and like Carmack being like, I just want to be a guy that eats pizza, drinks Diet Coke, and makes games, meaning he can abandon like people that helped him get there and animals.
Yep.
You know,
and animals.
It's definitely, I like this book because it doesn't just sugarcoat them and being like, oh, they're the best people in the whole world, you know, like,
yeah.
So, yeah, but Do you want to hear what I've been playing, Tyler?
I do want to hear what you've been playing, Mike.
Oh, we didn't do it last week, which is good because I wanted to give it a couple weeks of thought before I told everyone that you and I started playing World of Warcraft.
Oh boy! And you had your first experience with literally killing spiders for their butts.
I did. I actually killed spiders for their venom sacs, which I'm pretty sure is their butt. That's just pretty much their butt. It has to be. So
it's got to be.
I like World of Warcraft a lot. I feel like I am very late to a party, though. That's how I feel. I feel overwhelmed, and I'm luckily I have you there and our friends to help me get through it.
Yeah.
We went into a dungeon, and I still didn't entirely know how to tank, and I got kicked from said dungeon because I was doing it wrong, which I was very upset about at the time. And then I'm like, oh well, that makes sense. I didn't know what I was doing, and now that I know, I've learned, and it's better. I'm playing a human monk, and I just like to throw barrels of beer at people. That's all I do, which it feels good. But that's kind of all I've been playing. I know there's the new Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. I kind of waited this week to decide if I wanted to buy it, and I think I'm going to buy it because I need it. It's only $40.
Yeah.
I think it's a mistake of me not to buy it because I want some serious nostalgia.
I think you would be losing money if you didn't buy it.
That's exactly
how good of a deal
think.
it is.
Probably going to buy it tonight and have it download so it's ready tomorrow morning. What have you been playing, Tyler?
Well, I have also been playing World of Warcraft, playing on a character that I had started about 2 years ago in preparation for the Battle for Azeroth expansion. And then I was like, I had this fantasy of me and my friends all leveling up from 0 to get to 120 so we could play the new content. And then as soon as the expansion came out, they all switched from Alliance to Horde, and they leveled up brand new characters, did the boost, boosted to the, not the cap, but whatever the boost was at the time. And so I did that too, so I could continue playing with them. And I left my Night Elf Rogue just to gather dust and cobwebs.
But now the Night Elf Rogue's hanging out with me.
But now, exactly, we're playing Alliance for this next expansion, and so while we're getting ready for it, we're leveling up the guys that we had abandoned a couple of years ago, and so I'm getting my Night Elf Rogue all leveled up, and I may still end up boosting some other class to play the new expansion, but I'm having a lot of fun. It's been fun playing with you, and it is interesting when you say you feel late to a party because we're playing all of the low level stuff, which was created quite literally almost 20 years ago. So it is all very old content, but it's going to be fun because as you level up and we get to the newer stuff, you sort of see a change in how they design dungeons and how the graphics get a lot better too. It's going to be really cool.
I already saw we played an old dungeon last night, and I was like, hey guys, where's the quest? There's no quest to pick up at the beginning. Because they're like, that's this dungeon is just a dungeon. There's nothing else in it. It's really old.
There's just nothing else in it. Yeah, that's how old it is.
That kind of blew my mind the most, and I was telling you about it, was who they created this giant perpetual game world, and I was had this quest where I had to go from Stormwind to Loch Modan, and I went into the lava zone thinking I had to walk there, and then our friend was like, there's a tram, and I'm like, there's a tram? And then him and I went to a bar in Stormwind, bought electronic versions of alcohol, and then drank there, and then drank our roadies on the tram to the dwarf city. And I was like, oh, I see why people love this game. This is amazing. You can take little it's train ride with friends. And I was like, oh, I get it now. I understand it completely. And it's fun. I'm still learning, and I'm super excited about it. We got some emails to read, though. Do you want to read some emails?
Yeah. Well, I did want to say that I have been playing Tony Hawk 1 and 2, and it's awesome. Love them. The music is great. They have most of the old music in there, but the new music that they've added fits really well too, for the most part. And it's just a very, very high quality port, or remaster, I guess. So I highly recommend, if you are a Tony Hawk fan, pick it up because it's awesome.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to get it this week, and then next episode you're just going to hear me singing Tony Hawk's praises the whole time.
Yeah.
The man and the game. Okay.
Yep.
So, all right, you want to read the first email we got from Liz?
Yeah, we got an email from Liz. She says, me and my boyfriend, whose name is also Tyler, just watched the Doom movie with your commentary, and man, it made the movie way better. Normally, I would have been bored by such a cheesy action movie, but we love you guys so much, we were both laughing the whole time. Y'all are 10 out of 10 YouTube quality movie commentators. We want more. Maybe the Mario movie or Final Fantasy, if of course you can legally obtain a copy. P.S. Tyler says Tyler got him into Destiny. He's been playing it just about every day instead of playing games with me. Hope y'all are doing well. Liz from Texas. Thanks, Liz. I would love to do Final Fantasy because as big of a Final Fantasy fan as I am, I actually haven't seen Spirits Within. And so it would be fun to do a commentary of like me watching it for the first time. I think that would be cool.
I've never watched it either. It would be both of us going in blind. I'm into it.
Oh, that sounds great. Mario movie sounds good too, just because I have actually seen it a bunch of times and I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. You can't. It's so bad, but it's so good.
Yeah.
Also, we got someone into Destiny. Yay!
Great.
Does he play on PC? Looking for friends. Okay. I got the next email. You ready?
Yep.
All right. This email is from also Mike. Oh. Hey, guys. Hi from Canada. I've been listening to your podcast for the past few weeks while restating my deck, and we have really enjoyed them. I love your banter. Despite what one of your listeners recently said, the two of you complement each other and definitely continue with the cheese factor. Lol. I really enjoyed your MGS, or Metal Gear Solid, Sonic, Mac History, and Spider-Man episodes. I would also like to add, because of your podcast, I've returned to gaming. I'm a family guy with my wife and 2 young kids, so my PS4 hasn't gotten much use in the past few years. I started playing Metal Gear Solid 5 again and just bought the latest Spidey game. So excited to be back. Gaming will now be used to reduce stress in my life. I'm a paramedic, so it's needed. Cheers, Mike, the seasoned paramedic. Thank you, Mike. Glad. Oh, and he showed he's put a picture of his deck.
It looks great.
Before and after.
There's a before and after. Nice. The after looks very shiny. I like it.
Oh, yeah. That's a good stain you got there, you know?
Yeah.
I actually, we need to kind of redo my deck, too, so I'm super amped about it, you know? It's pretty great.
Use this as inspiration.
I will use it. Thank you so much for your email,
We get him
Mike.
into gaming. He gets us into restaining our decks.
One into gaming, one into staining, you know?
Hey, nice.
There it is. All right. We got one final email. You want to read this one?
Sure. This one it says about the Breath of the Wild ending. It says, "Hi, I am 11 and I just beat Breath of the Wild and I hate the ending. I did all the memories and Divine Beasts and get nothing for beating Ganon. Do you think more games will have this kind of ending?" And I want to say, I'm so sorry. But yes, there are lots of games that give you nothing for beating the game except for the satisfaction of having completed the game.
Yeah, it's kind of a hard part, too, because you get more if you get the DLC with Breath of the Wild. But I mean, it's cool what you get, but it's still, I don't know what you're looking for, you know? I mean, I think Breath of the Wild 2, there's going to be a Breath of the Wild 2, so you're going to get that, you know? So there could be a good ending of that. I'm excited for it. I'll play it, you know?
Me too, same.
Especially after my love of Breath of the Wild 1. But yeah, it's really true. There's so many games that leave you wanting more, which is kind of what they're designed to do, I feel like, too.
Yeah. Yeah, Nintendo games are at least in the earlier days, and maybe they still do this today, they often do the thing where you finish the game and then you get like the end screen and that's it. And it just like freezes on that screen and you're just supposed to turn your system off and back on if you want to keep playing. And it doesn't save. It doesn't, like, there's no acknowledgement when you get back into the game. There's no acknowledgement that you've beat it already before. And it just like puts you back to right before when you know, wherever your last save was.
Oh, I forgot to mention this, I guess. I beat Fallen Order. That Jedi game I was playing.
Oh, yeah.
It's really, really good. And also,
does it have a good ending? Did you get cool stuff afterwards?
It has a really good ending that's really cool. But it also has a plus mode when you beat it. So you can go back and play it on a plus mode. Harder.
Nice.
So, I mean, it's cool that games do that. But yeah, Breath of the Wild, there's just so much to explore in that game that's what I kind of went back and did. I just explored around the world and got all the shrines and everything done because it just felt really good, you know, to be. Yeah. It just makes you feel good about being in that world, I think is what Breath of the Wild's all about. So thank you for the email, those. We appreciate all those emails. We got one more. We got a new review.
Ooh.
It's 5 stars from The Fourth Stranger. Great Jaybird podcast. Great listen. Love the positivity. Jaybird for life. Thank you, The Fourth Stranger. We are the #1 Jaybird podcast on the internet, I think, for sure.
I think so, yeah.
Others try to hate, not us. Okay, not us. But yeah, next week we're gonna get right back into more id. It's getting to be a big series here. I hope that's okay with everyone. Please feel free to email us. You know, let us know what you think about new ideas for episodes. You can join our Discord. I have the link at the top of my Twitter profile, or you can email us at codexhistoryypodcast@gmail.com. I don't know why I just forgot how email works. And I'll send you the link to it too. Other than that, I'm on Twitter at Micoletta. Tyler's on Twitter at SneakerElf, ELPH. And that's it for the day. We did it, Tyler. Do you want to say bye to everyone?
Sure. Goodbye, everyone.